You know who it's really good to be right now? Ndamukong Suh. Why? Because he's about to get paid! Let me state that again for clarification. He's about to get paid! Yeah, he's about to cash in, and cash in he should. Ndamukong Suh, beyond question, the marquee free agent in this NFL offseason. I'm looking at Ndamukong Suh, the former #2 overall pick in the 2010 draft out of Nebraska, who spent the past 5 years with the Detroit Lions and become the, I say, prototype of the 4-3 defensive tackle in today's NFL, the dominant interior force in all of the National Football League, as a guy that is going to get, wait for it, paid! I'm looking at him and saying, what a lucky son of a bitch. Timing is everything. Now that J.J. Watt got his huge money deal, and that set the table for Ndamukong Suh and what he could ask for, I think Suh's going to get more than J.J. Watt, both in terms of overall money and guaranteed money, which is what really matters when it comes to NFL contracts, where J.J. Watt got a little north of $51 million in guarantees and about $100 million in total value of contract. I fully expect, with the number of teams with massive cap space and the desire to go after a guy like Ndamukong Suh, looking at him as being a guy that could get anywhere between 55 to maybe even 60 million in guaranteed money and a total overall contract value of somewhere between 105 and 115 million dollars. Again, it's really good to be Ndamukong Suh because he's about to get what? Paid! Now, here's the thing for Ndamukong Suh when it comes to his offseason and his big free agent decision. He has a lot of options, but some options might not be as good as others. Like, you look at some of the teams that have the most cap space. They don't really work, in my mind, for Ndamukong Suh. So that takes some of the potential top bidders to drive his price up out of the marketplace. Teams like the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets and the Tennessee Titans and the Green Bay Packers. You look at the Browns, Suh probably would not want to go there no matter how much he got paid, and they run a 3-4 defense. You look at the Jets, defensive line is not a need of theirs at all, so going after Ndamukong Suh, frankly, would kind of be a bit of a waste of money and resources, and they also run a 3-4 defense, which Suh has never played in at the NFL level. You look at the Tennessee Titans, yeah, they'll have the money to throw around, but they could probably throw him a Brinks truck or two, and Ndamukong Suh probably wouldn't want to play for the Tennessee Titans. And they also, again, run a 3-4 defense. And the Green Bay Packers are not a team that is prone to spend big in free agency. And as a result, they usually reinvest that money in their own team, which is what you would expect them to do. And they also run a 3-4 defense. So those are 4 of the top 10 teams in this offseason in terms of overall salary cap space that are non-factors in the decision-making process for Ndamukong Suh. I'd be surprised if any of them made any type of effort or bid for his services. You look at some of the other teams, though, that do have the most cap space. You look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have more cap space than anybody else, $68 million. And without having a bunch of stars that they have to re-sign to big long-term deals, they can throw Fort Knox at freaking Ndamukong Suh. Whatever the price is, nobody could outbid the Jacksonville Jaguars this offseason, period. Period. If money is what matters most to Ndamukong Suh, and that's the sole determining factor, you look at Jacksonville, and there's $68 million in cap space, combined with the fact that they're in the state of Florida. That means no state income tax, allowing Ndamukong Suh to keep more of his money. And that is a factor, and that's a big factor, one that will be talked about a little bit more, I'm sure, as free agency gets ready to kick off this weekend. The Jacksonville Jaguars could potentially be an interesting option for Ndamukong Suh, even though, as so often is the case, great players that go from good teams to bad teams for the payday don't usually see those moves pan out very well. The Oakland Raiders are another appealing option. They've got about $55 million in cap space without having, again, a bunch of guys, because they've been so bad for so many years, that they have to re-sign to big long-term deals. But this is a defense with some talent on it. You look at last year's first-round pick, Khalil Mack. You look at another guy like C.O. Moore at linebacker. You have a couple of nice linebackers on the outside. There is some talent there. There is a little bit of hope, at least for the future, for the Oakland Raiders. For Ndamukong Suh, again, the Oakland Raiders, cash flow issues maybe aside, do have the cap space to be able to go after him and give him a big money deal. And what might also appeal to Ndamukong Suh as well when you're talking about trying to increase your overall wealth is the fact that the Raiders at some point in time could very well be moving to L.A. during the life of his next contract. As a result, he gets in that LA media market, and the possibilities and marketing opportunities are endless. Look at a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, almost $40 million in cap space. And Ndamukong Suh might not want to go from a good team to a bad team. Well, in this case, if he went from the Detroit Lions to the Cincinnati Bengals, he's going from one good, solid team to another good, solid team that is going to be able to pay him. You look at the Bengals, though, this isn't really something that's necessarily a part of their history. They've not been known as, at least in recent years, as big, huge gamblers and spenders in free agency. I have to admit, though, the thought of him playing inside next to Geno Atkins, next to Carlos Dunlap is very appealing for a Bengals team, I would think, that understands that their pass rush was horribly, horrendously bad this year and was a big reason why they didn't go farther than what they ultimately did. You look at the Atlanta Falcons, another team with a ton of cap space that has been clearing out some room recently, releasing Harry Douglas and Steven Jackson. They, with a new head coach in Dan Quinn and perhaps a switch to a 4-3 defense full-time, no hybrid crap, no elements of anything else, staying with that 4-3, but the type of 4-3 that Dan Quinn wants to run like they ran in Seattle. Maybe an Ndamukong Suh is that type of guy that they could line up both at tackle and end in that Seattle-type system. And again, the Falcons with Arthur Blank are not afraid to spend big-time money. This is a team with loads of weapons still on offense with the franchise quarterback and Matt Ryan. Maybe Ndamukong Suh looks at that as a really good opportunity. And then we talk about another team in the state of Florida. We keep coming back to that state. Is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You imagine the hard-on that a Lovie Smith would get thinking about Gerald McCoy and Ndamukong Suh, guys that were drafted one pick after the other in the 2010 draft, playing next to each other in that 4-3 Tampa 2 Lovie Smith defense. Just imagine the possibilities there. Imagine how much that would improve that entire defense when you have Suh and McCoy next to each other. And the Buccaneers have the cap space to be able to do it. And it might be an appealing option again because when you look at the Buccaneers, a guy like Lovie Smith is a guy that a lot of players respect, a lot of cap space, so they can pay Ndamukong Suh. They've shown a willingness, the Glazer family, to spend big in free agency, make those splashy moves like they did this past offseason. And for a Buccaneers organization that's looking at having to draft a quarterback at #1 overall, therefore maybe passing on a guy like a Leonard Williams, this might be their way to be able to get that type of impact difference maker and actually so much more in Ndamukong Suh. And again, for Suh, huge opportunity, big-time payday, and no state income tax. Now, there's a lot of questions about whether or not the Detroit Lions will be willing to re-sign him, whether they can afford to re-sign him for the long-term viability and flexibility financially of their organization. Right now, the Lions have about $18 million in cap space. They've got huge mega deals already on the books for Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson. And you wonder, can they really afford to pay a third mega massive contract to somebody, even if it happens to be not only their best defensive player, maybe their best player on their entire team in Ndamukong Suh? How much would that hamstring that organization? How much would that constrict that organization long-term in trying to improve and trying to take that step to that next level? Does Ndamukong Suh want to stay in Detroit? Has he grown tired of being in Detroit? Does he feel that he could get a better payday and an equal chance to win in another location? An interesting question. I look at this right now and I see two teams that stand out to me for different reasons as teams that could end up being in the Ndamukong Suh mix. That you'll hear a lot more about, I think, in the days to come. One is going to be the Indianapolis Colts. You've got a team with loads of cap space that is in desperate need of an interior defensive line difference maker that is also ready to contend now. That's a lot of the things I would have to envision that Ndamukong Suh is really looking for with his next deal, whoever he is going to sign with, whether that's re-signing with Detroit or going to somebody else. A team with loads of cap space that could give him a big-time deal, a team that is going to value him on the interior of that defense, and a team that is ready to contend right now. You look at the Colts, and they have all of that. The question I have, though, is that even though Suh, to me, is the best defensive tackle in the business, and I have full confidence that he can play in any defensive system, whether that's a nose in a 3-4, or that's an end in a 3-4, or tackle or held with his skills end in a 4-3. The bottom line is the Colts play a 3-4. Suh has played his entire career in the 4-3. Do you really want to sign this guy to a mega massive deal when you have no guarantees of how well he's going to translate to a different type of defensive system unless you're going to entirely change your defensive system around this guy, which I believe is what you would have to do. Would the Indianapolis Colts be willing to do that? Do they have the ability to afford to do that? Furthermore, even though the Colts have a ton of cap space, they have this little albatross hanging over them, and that is re-signing Andrew Luck. You know they're going to try and do that this offseason, and as a result, that is going to require a lot of that salary cap space. So how much of that salary cap space is really available for this Colts team that needs to re-sign their franchise future elite quarterback in Andrew Luck and still needs to make other moves outside of potentially signing an Ndamukong Suh to be able to take that next step, get past the Patriots, and get to the Super Bowl in 2015 or maybe beyond? The other team I look at is the Miami Dolphins. You talk about a Miami Dolphins team that, while they don't nearly have the cap space, in fact, they would have to get very creative in how they would structure this deal financially, and they would have to offload several pieces to be able to create enough salary cap space to go after a guy like a Suh. This is a team that runs a 4-3 defense, which is a defense that Suh is very familiar with, very comfortable with. That's the system that is best for him. A Suh signing makes that Dolphins front four in particular scary. You're talking about the ends of Wake and Vernon. Now you throw a Suh in the mix and whoever the hell else you want to keep, retain, sign, or draft to play next to Suh in the middle. That might be the best front four in the National Football League. That impacts the rest of that defense, and as a result, that makes that Dolphins defense scary, probably makes them a top 10 unit, if not a top 5 unit in elite defense. That might help the Dolphins get over that playoff hump, at least if anything else, help them get into the playoffs, maybe makes them a little bit of a threat to the New England Patriots in the AFC. It might. But again, when you look at the Dolphins, it's about the fact that they don't have a state income tax in Florida, allowing Ndamukong Suh to be able to keep more of his money. When I keep thinking about it, if Ndamukong Suh is really about the money, like truly about the money, he would sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars because they have the most money to offer and no state income tax. That's simple. So I don't think we should begrudge him if he did sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars. We could question him and make fun of him a little bit, but at the end of the day, a lot of us would do the same thing. We're going to get the deal that is the best for us and allows us to keep the most money in our pockets possible. If he signs with anybody other than the Jacksonville Jaguars, if they actually made an offer to him, then I don't see how anybody could say Ndamukong Suh was in it strictly for the money, because clearly the money would be the best with the Jaguars and the situation financially would be best with the Jaguars, even more so than the other Florida teams like Tampa Bay and Miami. When all is said and done, where should Ndamukong Suh sign? A lot of people are going to talk about the Indianapolis Colts. And I can see that as an option, a viable option, and a very likely option. I'm just not sure if that's the best place for him, and I'm not sure that's the best fit, even though there's a lot of reasons that that place would be incredibly appealing to Ndamukong Suh. When I look at the Miami Dolphins, again, we talk about a team that while they'd have to get creative, and they're already starting to release players, we have to release more and get more creative to be able to create the cap space necessary to go after a Suh and sign him to a long-term deal and give him that loads and loads of front-loaded guaranteed money. This is a team that running that 4-3 defense is a more natural fit for Suh. But even bringing him in, does that really improve the Dolphins that much? Yes, it would improve the defensive side of the ball, but how much of a difference does it really make? It might get him over the playoff hump, but does it take him up to that next level? I'm just not really sure that's the case. And Ndamukong Suh might very well be better off staying with the Detroit Lions long term. He might very well be. I don't know at this point in time where exactly he's going to sign. For my money, if it's all about the money, then he should sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars. If he wants to be a part of something and help build a winner, he should go to the Oakland Raiders, because it also has the benefit of potentially moving to LA, but this is an organization whose needle is at least slightly pointing upward, and he could make a big-time difference and still get incredibly paid. If he wants to contend and be a part of a difference-making team while still being paid very, very well, a team like the Cincinnati Bengals makes a ton of sense. Heck, even a team like the Atlanta Falcons makes quite a bit of sense. At the end of the day, in my opinion, I think he should just re-sign with the Detroit Lions. No, I don't. I want him as far out of the NFC North as possible. As possible. Wherever Ndamukong Suh signs, I don't care. I just don't want to see him play against my Chicago Bears twice a year any damn more. I'm tired of him wrecking my team and fucking shit up. Ndamukong Suh, chase that cheddar, baby. Get paid and get the hell out of the NFC North.